First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. And it's actually Dr. Mary Hill Wagner. It's Wagner, and because my husband's German, and I'm on a personal mission to get everybody to pronounce the German Wagner as Wagner. So my maiden name, can we say that anymore, is Hill. And I grew up Mary Hill in the lovely city of Compton, California. I said, go Compton, go Tar Bags. And we just had our 40th high school reunion, so we're all amped up about it, being a Tar Babe. I wanted to talk to you about a few things today. I wanted to talk to you about one of my favorite topics is persistence, okay, and perseverance. And the dictionary says that persistence is doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Again, despite the difficulty or delay in achieving success. And this has been a theme in my life. When I was a student at Enterprise Junior High School, it's called middle school now, I guess, in lovely Compton, go Eagles, I took a woodshop class from Mr. Silverman. And in this woodshop class, there were 18 boys and 2 girls. I was one of the girls. And Mr. Silverman looked out at the class and looked specifically at myself and the other girl, and he said, these girls will be gone in 2 weeks. The only reason they took this class is they want to sit next to the cute boys. Okay, and you were allowed to say those things in those days. And everybody thought it was hilarious. And it turned out he was right about the other girl, whose name I won't mention, who I'm still friends with today. He was right about the other girl. She wanted to sit next to the cute boys. None of the cute boys liked her, so she left. But I'd taken the class for a different reason. I'd taken the class because I wanted to learn how to do woodshop. That was my goal. You know, I mean, Jesus was a carpenter. It has to be a perfectly legitimate endeavor. And so I wanted to learn how to use a plane, and how to do saws, and how to measure things, and how to bore holes. We got 3 projects. We were told to do a coat rack, a broom holder, and the big project at the end, a birdhouse. Okay, that was the big project in the class. And I began, as other students began, learning how to measure and make things level and all that. And I was terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. And just lousy at it. The broom holder could not hold a broom. The coat rack couldn't even hold a scarf. For some reason, I built the coat rack, I think, upside down. And so things were spilling off of it instead of staying on it. And at the end of the semester, we built birdhouses. You know, I was still there, you know, just coming in early, getting the janitor to open the door so I could go in and, you know, paint my little birdhouse, you know. And my brother said that my birdhouse, he said I was a birdhouse slumlord because my birdhouse leaked and the thing was cracked and it was just terrible. It looked pretty. It was terrible. And Mr. Silverman gave me a D on every single project. There was a D on every single major project. And as students, I think you understand what it is to get a D, especially if you are academically successful. I was an academically successful person from the time I was small. And in other subjects, in my Spanish class, in my English class, and all these other classes, I was a star. And I was used to like getting my A's, getting my B's. But on these projects, I received a D. I was crushed, and I thought, oh, this is really gonna do a number on my GPA. But when I got my report card back, I was astounded. There was a C where it said woodshop. And I know you're not supposed to look a gift horse in the mouth, as they say, but I had to go to Mr. Silverman and I said, what's this? I was in this class. And he said to me something that I've used in my life, something about persistence. He said, this is what you deserve because I've never seen any student, boy or girl, work so hard on something for which they had absolutely no aptitude. But you persisted. Every time I turned in a project and then you brought it to me, I said, oh, this is terrible. This is what he would say. Oh, this is awful. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. And you would go and you would do the next project. And you just kept doing that. Every time I told you it was terrible, it was awful, you don't have any talent for this, you would come back and you would say, maybe I can do it better. And so that's what I want to tell you about persistence. That's a little story to illustrate how you can persist in life despite what anybody thinks of you. Despite the fact they say you're the only female, or you are the only African American, or the only Mexican, or the only Asian, or the only anything. You can succeed if you have that thing, that quality, that grit. One of my professors at the University of Southern California, my undergraduate school, said I had moxie. And moxie is an old word. He'd grown up in the Great Depression, so moxie was a word he was familiar with. I had to look it up. And it said a person with persistence. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, the persistence that keeps you in the game. Because if you're not in the game, you would never win the game. There's something that Calvin Coolidge said about persistence and perseverance, which are similar words. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent, he said. The slogan, press on, is solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. And I tend to agree with that. And before I get into reading the chapter from the book and any questions you might have, I'm going to leave you with this other anecdote. Does anybody know who the Supreme Court Justice is, who was recently appointed? She's an African-American woman. Her name? Okay, it's not a game show, you don't have to know it. I'm going to tell it to you. You lose 20 points. The Honorable Ketanji Brown Jackson. Ketanji Brown Jackson is the first African-American woman to ascend to the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court. And she says when she was in high school, yes, I'm sure that, when she was in high school, she walked across Harvard Yard and she thought, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. These people, these are the hallowed halls of learning. I don't belong here. This is the very top of the top. And she said she felt nervous and she felt out of place, fish out of water. And she said, she describes this herself in her confirmation hearing. She says there was what she called a random black woman who walked up to her and said, what did she say? Yes, yes, she knows. She said, persevere. And she took that, and now she is on the United States Supreme Court. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. She recognized the persistence, perseverance is the thing, sometimes is the thing, which separates people from those who are successful and those who are unsuccessful. And I was going to give you, I guess, we have some visual learning things, which are just pictures of me. But I'm going to read you a chapter from Girlz N the Hood, which is my book. Right after me. That's not me. Okay. This is just an advertisement for the book. This is me in high school. See, my hair's always been the same, never changed. This is me in high school. Val remembers this picture. This is me at Compton High School, and looks like I have braces. I didn't have braces, that's weird. But it's all like big on the screen, it's weird. And the next picture, that's also me. This is graduating Compton High School. And I look better because I make myself up. I think I make myself up for the first time in my life there. I did a good job. And see, it says classified tape. This picture is me, and I want this picture to be in your mind as I'm reading. This is the picture of me and my mother in the front yard of our house at Compton in Compton, when I was in Compton High School. And this is the face of my mother, which is kind of like my face, that I want you to see as I read this chapter of, and because I'm going to read it while that's up. I'm going to read chapter 3 of Girlz N the Hood. This is my book, which will be on sale in the lobby after the presentation. Girlz N the Hood, a Memoir of Mama in South Central Los Angeles. And I'm going to read chapter 3 called Sarah's Brood. Okay? There is some swearing, so if you want to leave, that's fine with me, because this is about real life. It's not a fairy tale. People swore, especially in those days. And there is some violence happening in here. Again, this is real life. Okay? As soon as we got the phone call, we left to catch the RTD at the corner of Manchester and Broadway. We were in such a hurry that we didn't bring our sweaters, and the 40-degree morning chill set our teeth to chattering. The phone call that had gotten us moving was something like this. I need to speak to the mother of Bobby Cotton. I'm the mama of Bobby Cotton. What's he got into? My mother didn't believe what she was hearing and thought the call was a prank. And this is Terry Thomas playing some kind of joke. I'm gonna whoop your ass when I see you, boy, she said. Terry Thomas was my brother's best friend and was known as the neighborhood prankster. Maybe his parents had named him after the silly white comic with a gap in his teeth, or maybe not. Nobody seemed to know. In any case, our Terry thought he was hilarious. His favorite joke was to put a bucket of water over a half-open door and then call someone from another room. After pushing the door open, you'd find yourself soaked with water. I fell for the trick once. Most of his victims were other kids like me. He wouldn't dare prank a grown-up, I thought, especially my mother. But then my mother listened, realizing that it wasn't Terry Thomas on the line. Finally, my mother said, okay, and hung up the phone. She grabbed her mailbag-sized brown purse, took my hand in hers, and went out the door. We headed for the nearest bus stop at Manchester and Broadway, where the numbered 45 bus was scheduled to stop at 6 a.m. We waited on the curb between two Mexicans in khaki janitorial uniforms waiting for their ride to work. We all stared down the road with the same hopeful look, as if looking for the bus would make it arrive sooner. Buses always ran 10 to 15 minutes behind in South Central. No one seemed to know why. Finally, the bus arrived in a cloud of black smoke. The air brakes screamed like a dog hit by a car. Then the doors opened with a blast of heat. We stepped onto the bus. My mother deposited 50 cents. The driver looked me up and down and then stared at my mother. She's 5, she said simply. She rides for free. Actually, I was 8, small for my age. I knew my mother didn't like to lie about such things, but it was the end of the month and the latest welfare check wouldn't arrive until the following week. She probably needed that 50 cents extra to pay for Bobby on the return trip, I thought. My mother waited for me to scramble into the window seat directly behind the driver. She sat on the aisle. Hey driver, do you stop near the 77th Division Police Station? The driver said nothing, but pointed to a sign that said, do not converse with the driver. My mother clucked her teeth, folded her arms across her ample chest and sat back. A man behind us said, I'm going near there. It stops right out front. Thank you, my mother said and closed her eyes. Out of the window, the neighborhood passed us by, boarded up buildings, liquor stores, pawn shops, chicken shacks, dirt lots, and gas stations. The guy behind us pulled the stopping cord directly over my head. I patted my mother's arm and pointed. We got up and exited the bus. It was like stepping out of a hot bath into the freezer. The 77th Division Police Department was a tan building with a number of tall glass windows. Just inside the door, uniformed officers crowded the front room. My mother went up to the counter where a pretty blonde sat behind a desk. She was wearing a form-fitting, fluffy pink sweater and matching lipstick. She looked like one of the dolls I had at home. I wanted to brush her long, straight blonde hair. Her name tag said, Peg. How may I help you this fine morning? Peg asked, drawing out the word morning like a song. Her southern accent sounded a bit like my mother's, I thought. I wanted to ask if she was from Louisiana too. But there was no time to discuss it. My mother got right down to business. I got a call and they said you got my boy down here. You might have him under the name of Robert Lee Cotton or under Bobby Cotton. Peg flipped through some papers. I don't see that here, she said. Why don't you have a seat and I'll take a look at the overnights. We sat on a wooden bench that was covered in scratches and graffiti. I started reading some of the scrawled messages out loud. What's missing here? CH --CH. I laughed. Put in UR, and that spells church, I told my mother. Get it? It means you are missing from church. My mother nodded. Look at this one. It says, fisting is for sissies. Ma, what's fisting? My mother frowned, but before she could tell me to stop bothering her, Peg chimed in from across the room. You need to see Detective Conroy right away. Where he at? He's been called, Peg said. We waited a few more minutes before a white man in a brown suit approached us. His wide brown and white striped tie was stained with red spots that might have been ketchup or blood. His brown hair and brown eyes were the same color as his suit. When he leaned over me, I could see a long brown hair coming out of his nose, and I stared at it. I wondered why no one had told him about it. It was clear that he didn't know it was there, like the flaky dandruff on the collar of his brown suit. You Sarah Gordon? Yeah. Yeah, my mother said, and she stood up. This way, he said, pointing to a door behind Peg's desk. She gave a little wave as we passed, and I noticed her long nails were painted the same shade of pink as her lipstick. The detective led us into a big office space divided into groups of areas, each with a sign telling what kind of police work was done there. Above one area, a sign read, Arson Division, because there was, and I thought maybe it had something to do with fire, because there was smoke everywhere. Maybe the whole place had something to do with fire, I thought. There was also a big cloud of smoke over Homicide Division and Bunco Squad, whatever that was. I craned my neck to see the source of the smoke, and I noticed that everyone in the room was smoking something. I counted 4 cigarettes, 10 cigars, and a pipe. Can I smoke? My mother said. We would rather you didn't, the cop said. A cigarette could be used as a weapon. Sit over there. My mother sat in the chair on the side of a big wooden desk. I stood next to her. Nobody thought about getting me a chair. Look, Sarah, we got a problem with your boy. Okay, what happened? And you can call me Mrs. Gordon. She wasn't about to let him disrespect her. I thought maybe she ought to be more respectful, seeing as he was a cop. Are you trying to get us arrested? I wanted to ask, but I didn't, because I didn't want to be backing it right in front of the detective. He didn't seem to even notice I was there. The cop shook his head and began again. Mrs. Gordon, he said, through clenching his teeth as though it pained him to show her any respect. Last night, your son and a boy named Terry Thomas on top of one of the local churches with some Molotov cocktails. Is Bobby all right? Yes, but there's a complication. What kind of complication? He was hurt when they got him down. Terry's all right, though. Not a scratch on him. Yeah, okay. But what kind of scratches are we talking about on my boy? Well, he broke his arm. My mother nodded and said, anything else? It was a clean break, but he was in our custody at the time. The arresting officers took him to the hospital in an ambulance and then brought him back here. We're talking about some pretty serious charges here, like destruction of private property and arson. Did they burn down the church? No, but that's only because we stopped them. When can I see Bobby? Soon, Mrs. Gordon, he said, but you're going to have to sign a couple papers first. The detective tried to open the drawer on his wooden desk, but it seemed to be stuck. Finally, he took out what looked like a butter knife and forced it open. Lousy fucking piece of government crap, he muttered, taking out some papers and handing them across the desk to my mother. My mother read them, and her frown deepened. She slid the paper back to the detective. This here say that you didn't do nothing wrong, she said. We didn't. We just stopped your son in the commission of a felony. Are the officers hurt? She asked. No, but they could have been. 2 grown men with guns facing off against 2 unarmed 16-year-old boys. Yeah, but as I said, they had an incendiary device. That means, I know what incendiary means, my mother said. You ain't dealing with your average street nigga. And I know it don't say on those papers that my boy and Terry get to go home without charges. Fair enough, Mrs. Gordon. We can put in there ain't gonna be no charges. And we can also put in there that you ain't gonna file no lawsuits. He was mocking her, but it didn't matter because she had gotten her way. Fine, my mother said, rising to her feet. Bring Bobby out here and I'll sign. Bobby was brought out of the back room. My big brother looked smaller somehow. He was bent over and his eyes were bloodshot. He was cradling his right arm, which was wrapped in a sling. It looked like he was rocking a baby. His white t-shirt was torn and his jeans were muddy. There were no laces in his sneakers. My mother went to Bobby and tilted his chin toward her. She moved his head gently from side to side, inspecting his face with the practiced eye of a mother of 8 who regularly bandaged skinned knees and applied cool cloths to hot foreheads. When she was satisfied, she patted her son on the back and squeezed his good arm. Then she gave him that mama stare, which we all thought of as her superpower. You couldn't lie when she was giving you that stare. Look me in the eye, boy. Did you do what they say you did? Bobby nodded, his eyes cast down. He looked like he might cry. The detective handed my mother a stack of papers and an ink pen. Just so you know, we won't be filing charges against Terry Thomas either. His grandmother already picked him up. My mother said nothing. She signed the papers and we left. There was no conversation on the bus ride home. Bobby and I sat on either side of my mother on the 3-person handicap bench in the front. We had the same bus and the same driver for the return trip, and we had for the ride in. The air was still too hot. When we got home, my mother took Bobby into her room and closed the door. I put a glass to my ear and tried to listen through the door, but I couldn't hear a thing. Why did this always work in the movies? I wondered. Then I scrambled to the sofa when I saw the doorknob turn. Bobby came out wearing only his underwear and the sling on his arm. He went into the boys' room and closed the door. My mother called me into her bedroom. I tried to get my lie straight about eavesdropping. This was switch-whooping territory, and I knew it. Look here, gal. You ain't got no cause to talk about this to no nosy neighbors, right? She gave me the stare. You didn't hear nothing at the door, right? No, ma'am, I said, and I was excused. I decided that it was best to go to the source. I went to the boys' room and gave Bobby the shave and the haircut knock. The 2 bits knock sounded from the other side, and I knew I could enter. Bobby, who always seemed to be bouncing off the walls, just looked sad and tired. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, but Mama said not to gossip about it," he said. "I'm tired. I just want to go to sleep." I felt bad for Bobby, and I didn't think he would get a whooping over this night's events. My mother probably figured he had suffered enough. I figured the same. So I left him alone. It wasn't long before Terry Thomas came to visit, and I asked him what happened the night Bobby had broken his arm. "Shoot, you should have seen them motherfucking pigs with guns drawn on us like we was Dillinger or some shit," Terry said. "I ran down the ladder in the back, they got me in the alley and brought me around the front." I looked up, and Bobby was still on the roof, looking into the police spotlight like there was pussy on the other side of it or something. And then the cop said on the loudspeaker, "You can jump down or we can shoot you down." So this crazy ass nigga jumped onto the police car. I could see they just wanted to shoot him and shut him up. He was rolling around so much and screaming and crying. They probably would have shot him if I wasn't there and put a piece on him or something. "Wow," I said, "y'all could have been killed." "It'll take more than a couple of stupid cops to take me out," he said proudly, crossing his arms. "Why was all y'all trying to burn down a church?" I asked. "We wasn't trying to burn down no church. That church is the tallest building on the block. When you go up high, you can see more," Terry instructed. "We was gonna light them cocktails on fire and throw them down in the street and watch them explode, just like fireworks." "You could have killed somebody," I said in my best Meaning Mama voice. "It was 2 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't no cars and no people," he said. "Damn people scared of everything nowadays." Bobby and Terry used to take me along in some of what they called their capers. Some of their capers included filling barbecue pits with wood and throwing in cans of deodorant or bottles of rubbing alcohol and watching them explode. We'd run behind a brick wall as Terry shouted, "Fire in the hole!" over his shoulder. But it wasn't long before my mother and Terry's grandmother caught on and punished the boys for wasting the contents of their medicine cabinets. So Terry and Bobby found other ways of causing destruction. M80 fireworks were readily available around the 4th of July, and the boys never missed a chance to blow up a school toilet or some such. Their capers, however, didn't consist of just destroying bottles, cans, and toilets. I told my mother that Bobby and Terry were also accustomed to stopping on the freeway overpass on the way home from school and tossing rocks into the traffic below. After that, Terry called me the Canary. I thought he had me mixed up with Cynthia because she was the one who liked Tweety Bird cartoons. Tweety was a canary. They should have called her the Canary, I thought. But when I asked my brother why Terry kept calling me that, he said it was because the canary was what they called people who were snitches. "Just remember, snitches get stitches," Bobby told me. I stayed away from Terry and his capers after that. Strangely, my mother didn't blame Terry for what had happened in the church, even though he was clearly the ringleader of this stupid scheme. She still invited him over for dinner, and something about her Christian duty to care for motherless children. Terry lived down the street with his grandmother, brother, and sister. The mother and father were no longer in the picture for whatever reason. The grandmother was a Jehovah's Witness, and she often carted the kids off to the Kingdom Hall against their will. In the meantime, Bobby got a lot of mileage out of that broken arm. Everyone in the neighborhood signed the plaster cast, covering it with crazy names like Pookie, Yum Yum, T-Bone, Mad Dog, and others. No one except Terry seemed to have a normal name. Terry told everyone the story of Bobby's death-defying leap from the church until my mother ordered him not to tell it anymore. It was just in time, too, because neighborhood stories would soon take center stage. The day before the news hit the block, my mother was out back putting the clothes on the line when Billy Bonner waved to her over the back fence. That's the end of chapter 3. The next chapter is, thank you. The next chapter is called The Friendly Neighborhood Spree Killer. That's Billy Ray Bonner, who, by the way, is still on California's death row to this day. Killed a whole bunch of people in my neighborhood when I was a kid. So that's kind of the tenor of Girlz N the Hood. And it's about my mother, and the reason why I called it a memoir of Mama in South Central Los Angeles is about the women and the girls in South Central Los Angeles, and what life is like, or was like. Hopefully it's not like that anymore, I don't know. What it was like growing up as an African American female in South Central Los Angeles in the 1970s and in the 1980s. And book continues apace in this vein. Again, there's some violence, there's some swearing, but that's also real life. So, what I wanted to do now, I don't know if you've received a bio of me, and I can tell you a little bit about my history. Did they get a bio? Just what was on the screen? Yeah. Okay. I graduated Compton High School in 1982. I was the valedictorian for the class, and I went to the University of Southern California, and I majored in journalism. I have a bachelor's degree in journalism, and I minored in international relations. In those days, I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. And after I graduated, I worked in the field of journalism for a number of years at various newspapers throughout the country. I've worked for the Des Moines Register, I've worked for the Chicago Tribune, the Las Vegas Sun, and a host of other newspapers. I was a newspaper journalist. I understand there are broadcast journalists in the room. I was a newspaper journalist, same thing except you write it down. Same thing as the broadcast journalist. And after that, I went to grad school at Ohio State. I received my master's degree in mass communication at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. And then I decided I was going to go back into the field. I was a reporter at the Chicago Tribune, and I finally hit the big time. Didn't care for the big time too much. And finally went back to school, and I did my PhD in mass communication at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I've taught at universities across the country. By my estimate, I've lived in 8 or 9 states. And that's kind of my career history. That was my career history, and my personal history. As you can see, I'm not a private person. But my personal history is all here in this book, and I've given you some information about my career history. When I was a reporter, I've been a reporter at a lot of newspapers, and very often I was the first or the only African American in the place. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge. It was a lot of fun. I've met a lot of terrific people as sources and also people in the newsroom. But it was a challenge. There's pressure to constantly represent the whole race. From people coming up to you going, well, what do you think about O.J. Simpson? I'm like, well, what do you think? No, what you think about it is much more important. What do black people think? Oh my God, I'm not tapped into the hive mind. I can tell you what black people all think about O.J. Simpson. Well, I think they think. I'm like, oh, that's even worse. So it was a challenge sometimes being the only one and being the first one. But remember what we started with, persevere. Those are challenges, and persevere beyond. I remember being in a newsroom in Des Moines where every time something happened in the portion of the black community, they would bring the person over to my desk, and they would say, she's involved in a program we need to write about. Then write about it. But she is black. I'm like, I see that. Will you write it? I'm like, well, she speaks English. So you don't need to actually talk to a person just because she's black. But again, it goes back to the persistence and perseverance. When I was reporting the Des Moines Register again, I would get all the magazines, the black magazines, the Jet. There used to be this magazine called Jet. Is it still Jet?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jet is still around?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Jet in a long time. Ebony?
Yeah.
Ebony's still around too?
Yeah, it just came back.
Oh, they just came back. Oh, okay. Jet, Ebony, Essence, these are all African-American focused, not necessarily own them, but focused magazines. I would wind up with the copies stacked this high. By the way, I already received them at home as subscriptions. So I would get 5 copies, because they'd send copies, free copies to all the editors of the departments, including sports. And I'd have 20 copies of Essence on my desk when I would come in on Monday, because Essence had come out that weekend. And I said, okay. Again, goes back to persistence and perseverance. I had already spoken to the staff about, you're allowed to write things about black people too. I'd already spoken to them several times. We had a whole, what we used to call brown bags, when everybody would get together and talk about issues. We had a brown bag on it, and I was like, it's okay, it's fine, nobody's gonna judge you, you know. And so I just sent out a company email. And I said, thank you for the many copies of Essence Magazine, Ebony, Jet, and Black Enterprise that have wound up on my desk this week. You can read them too. So I said, what I plan to do is I'm going to return them to the people to whom they were addressed, and I want a book report at the end of the week. So, and it was funny, nobody did the book report, but it was funny that they got the message again about that perseverance, about that persistence. Because what happens is that if you're the only one of something, think about it, what's going to happen when there's no one of something. Now they have a reason to just throw it in the garbage. Okay, so now I was trying to educate them into, this is fine, there's stories in here, there are things you need to know in here. It may not immediately apply to you, but it applies to other people. And that's why we call it mass communication. We don't call it white communication, that you're just talking to white people all the time, 24 hours a day. It's mass communications. You're trying to communicate with the masses, and black people and brown people and everybody else, hearing people and unseeing people and everybody else is part of that mass. Okay? So when you go out there in your career in journalism, persist, persevere, despite any kind of ignorance, frankly, or just a lack of personal interaction with other kinds of people. Sometimes people don't know that they're being, racist. That's the word. Can't avoid the word. So we're going to do, we're going to segue really quickly here. I think we're going out of time, but we're going to talk, if you have any questions, any about my self-affirmation, I didn't get to that. How I talk about perseverance, that's actually how I was able to do the things I have in my career, in my education, and in my life, is that perseverance and that persistence. You know, if you get a D in a class, take that class again. You don't have to. You don't have to take them as far as I know. You know, I taught at colleges. You don't have to take that class again. Take that class again. That professor will see you sitting up front going, what are you doing here? You passed. You know, but you didn't pass to your own satisfaction. Persevere. So, questions? Let's open up the questions. Yes, sir.
Oh, just a comment. I thought it was really important that you sent the magazine back to people. I think it's really important that people in media learn about other people, not just put the burden on people who look like the people they need to learn about. I thought that was really important, because some of the problems we get, people make generalizations and have horrible perceptions of people who look differently or think differently from them because they never studied them, never read anything about them, so they only go by generalization. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, thank you. You said that You know, it's good that I sent the magazines back because it's part of educating people about people who may not look like them. Yes, sir.
Just looking at media overall, right? Mass communications overall. How do you see the struggle in, let's say, black media, right? That's having a big issue right now as far as being front and center or just coming to the line. How do you see that that can be improved in the structure of how the black media is played out?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, one of the challenges in, okay, so I used to do PR for events, right? And BET was black owned, right? And then they got bought out. But with black media, such as magazines, Essence, or Elle magazine, or different magazines would come to cover the events, they were pushed out because the black network was brought out. So how do you see how we can change that narrative across like media across so we can all be accepted?
He said, how does black media get accepted, especially on the national stage when you want to cover things? I've also worked for, the Los Angeles Sentinel. That was one of my first jobs out of high school. I worked for Wave newspaper, which was also a black-centered newspaper, although it was owned by whites. And it's in South Los Angeles. And I worked for them twice, once as a reporter and then years later as one of the editors. And I would tell my reporters that you're going to an event, you have as much right to be there as the New York Times, but you have to have that in your own head. Again, that's about that persistence and that perseverance. You have to have that in your own head. I mean, if ABC, NBC, and CBS and CNN are all jumping up to ask the question to President Biden, I think the Los Angeles Times will be jumping up to ask the question to President Biden too. And that persistence is what gets recognized. Because not only will the source push people out there, like I only want to talk to the New York Times and the Washington Post. Not only will the source, the person you're interviewing, but the media, man, you don't have to listen to their question. They're from some little black newspaper or TV station or radio station. So the person, it's a burden, I know. But it's on the individual to say, my question is equal. I've been in press conference gaggle situations where in the first Persian Gulf War, Operation Desert Shield, I was a reporter at the Las Vegas Sun. And now this is the first war that we were about to be involved in since Vietnam. It was a big story. And we had Nellis Air Force Base there. So our congressperson was giving a press conference about whether or not there was going to be a draft. This is a big story. And so they sent people from all over the world, really, to interview. And I was up there with everybody else, and they were like, tell me your question, and I'll ask it for you. Really? I'm a reporter, you're a reporter. You're not going to ask my question. This is my story. Well, he's only going to recognize us. And I said, oh, yeah? So it's a little bird, again, it's that persistence, it's that perseverance. And I always had in my head, when I was a reporter, if I got an assignment, I did not come back without a story. If the cop said, you can't cross this line, you can't cross this line, I'm like, but I'm with the media. Oh, we only allow the big media to cross this line. I'm like, you're gonna have to arrest me because I'm coming back with a story about being in jail overnight. Because I would not go back to my newsroom without a story. And my story was gonna be, I got pushed out because I work for a black newspaper, and the cops are racist, and the news is right. That was gonna be my story. So what story do you want me to write? You want me to write the story about that you're not involved in, that doesn't make you look bad? About the event, the thing that's happening? Or you want me to write that story? And I would tell them to their face. And they knew that I had perseverance and moxie and all that. And so they could not push me out. So it's up to the reporter. Don't get pushed out. Don't allow them to push you out. You have as much right to be there as anybody else. Again, it's mass communication. It's not just about playing to the front row. It's about providing a service, rather, for the masses. I believe in journalism as a service in a democracy. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned your challenges of being the first in like your community and everything, and I feel like I relate to that because I'm first-gen Latina as well. So I guess my question would be, what advice would you give, us first in our community to grow our perseverance and like keep pushing and,
What
to
advi-
overcome those challenges? Like what's the best advice you can give us?
Her question is a good one. It's a very good question. What do you do when you're the first of something in your community, in your school, in your career? How do you grow your perseverance? I believe you act on it every day, and don't let anyone tell you that it's not important, that it doesn't matter. It matters, because you're an example to somebody else. It really matters. And I know when I was growing up, people would try to say, I changed the cadence, so you can hear it when I speak. I changed the way I speak, okay? And I did that on purpose. I changed the way, I call it, I Henry Higgins myself, if you know, it's My Fair Lady. I changed the way that I speak. And people would go say, you sound white. And as a kind of, as a kind of dig. I don't care. I don't care. I didn't change the way I speak because I wanted to sound white. I changed the way I speak because I wanted to sound the way people do in books. That's what I was reading. So when they give you unjustified criticism, persevere. Know what it is you're seeking. And know that it is important that if you're the only one, if you're the first one. Because when you are, you're an example to others. There's an African American woman on the United States Supreme Court. Did you ever think you'd live to see the day? And she has a unique perspective that none of those other justices have. A unique perspective about America. So cherish, I would say, cherish your unique perspective. And share it. Share it with other people. This is kind of what I've done in my book, Girlz N the Hood. I'm sharing my unique perspective. When I was trying to get this book published, I had a lot of trouble getting this book published because people kept saying, I've never seen anything like this before. What is it like? It's not like anything. I'm like, yeah, because it's unique. Why 7 of 9, the element gets to be unique? That's what the Star Trek says. So, really, yes, it is. It's a unique perspective, and I cherish it. And I'm telling a story that, like, you're telling a story that's not been told before. And I would say, yes, isn't that something we're supposed to do? So tell your story. When everybody's sitting around your newsroom, talking about their summer camp, or talking about, the thing that brings them together in common, talk about the thing that you love in your culture. Talk about that thing. Because I've always done that, where I talk about the things because there are things that I love in my culture. So that's how you persevere, by always putting it front and center. Putting it front and center. And don't hide your lamp under a bushel, as the scriptures say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, other questions? Are we wrapping up here? Yes. Professor had a question?
Oh, yeah, there's a part in your book where you talk about how your mom nurtured your love of reading, and I wondered if you could just share that a little bit with the people who haven't read the book.
Okay, my mother loved books. She loved to read. When I was a toddler, my mother would read the Bible to me. As I said here, she was Jehovah's Witness. And she would read the Bible to me and tell me stories, and imbuing me the importance of stories. And so when I was old enough to, hold a book, I had my own books. And I was kind of bored in public education in Head Start, 4 years on, bored. I was